If you're wondering if I'm wearing my pajamas, my answer to that question is I am. Because we had our coldest night out here camping. I think it got down to 33 degrees. And so I'm bundled up trying to stay warm. It's still not that warm out. The horses have their hay to stay warm. So I wanted to talk about the best horse breeds for trail riding today. We've been on the road now for a little over a month. We've gotten to run into a lot of other trail riders and horses. We've gotten to try out some other horse breeds with trail riding. And so I want to talk about the best horse breeds. If you're someone who likes trail riding or wants to get into trail riding, you should research and look into these breeds. Really, I believe members of any horse breed could be good trail horses. Any horse can have good qualities on the trail. For example, I got a POA here and some type of Haflinger Morgan cross maybe with Ruach. So any horse can really be a good trail horse. I've seen like Belgian draft horses out on the trail and Percherons and things like that. But today I'm talking about when you invest in a member of a breed, these breeds are more apt to turn out good trail horses. Real quick, I just want to go through what makes a good trail horse. Number one, a horse that is sure-footed. You want a horse that can navigate varied terrain, whether you're just going down a nice simple trail or it's really rocky or you're dealing with ditches and roots that you're having to step up and down. That is a really big, important thing. Sure-footedness is something to some extent that you can train just by like working with your horse on different terrain and over certain obstacles. But there is like natural sure-footedness I find that I would like in a trail horse. Number two, you want a horse that has endurance. So a horse that will not tire out easily. They can go and climb hills and go for longer distances and not burn out. And this is another thing that can be developed in a horse, but there are certain breeds that just naturally have more capacity to handle longer distances. I think there's a deer back there. Oh, I see it. Wow. It's big. You want a brave horse. So a horse that, even though they may look at things and be iffy about them, that they are more than willing to approach or cross something. This is another thing that you can develop in a horse. For example, Tucker here has not always really been brave, but just over owning him for 8 years and really working with him, he is now very confident on the trail and he will approach just about any obstacle. Rather than bravery, I would say curiosity, because I find that with a horse that's naturally curious, yes, they may be fearful of something, but they will be curious enough to look at it or approach it, which is what Tucker was like, and it's how Ruach is. And Ruach is brave too. So those are good qualities. Another quality that I didn't really realize is very necessary in trail horses, but now I do know, is spatial awareness. And the reason I realized that this is an important quality in a trail horse is because our baby Ruach back here does not have spatial awareness yet. There's been some instances where he has like almost fallen in a ditch or, just run through something where he needed to think a little bit more through it. And my concern with him, for example, is if for some reason we are on a trail and there is a cliffside, I'm not too sure he wouldn't stop and he would just like jump off the cliffside. Okay, so you want spatial awareness in a horse. You want a horse that's aware of what's around it. You want a horse that, like if you're riding through a narrow trail, they know it's narrow. Like Tucker has very good spatial awareness. And he will like regulate himself to be mindful of what's around him. So I'm hoping that that develops a little bit more in Ruach, and we'll be working on that as well. Another quality that I personally want, but not everyone wants, is I want a quiet, trustworthy horse. So I don't want to be fighting my horse the whole way down the trail. I don't want them like nervous and freaked out the whole time we're on the trail. I want a horse that is quiet, that will take things as they come. If there is a situation where they spook or something happens, they can quickly like get back to being calm and quiet. Like those are really important characteristics for me because I want to enjoy the trail ride too. And if I'm on a horse that's constantly nervous or something happens and then they get worked up for the rest of the ride, that can kind of ruin the ride. So quiet is important to me. Okay, so we are going to jump into the best horse breeds for trail riding right now. For the number one breed for trail riding, I'm actually grouping a ton of breeds together because they would take over this whole list otherwise. But I'm saying any gaited horse breed is probably the #1 best horse breed you can have for trail riding. If you're wondering what a gaited horse is, let me just name some breeds so you get it in your mind. We got Tennessee Walkers, Missouri Foxtrotters, Rocky Mountain horses, Icelandic horses. What a gaited horse is they move differently than normal horses, or trotting horses as they call them. A gaited horse will move and they always keep one foot on the ground. And so that makes them incredibly smooth to ride. So Colin and I got to ride some Tennessee Walkers recently on a trail. And like, it is a world of difference riding a gaited horse compared to what we would consider a normal horse. Like, they're just so much more comfortable. If you are someone who maybe has pain in your body or has dealt with injuries, or you're getting older, a gaited horse would be very comfortable for you to ride on the trail and ride all day and still be comfortable. And so that's why I think a lot of people are starting to accept them more. They have different gaits than what we're used to. So we're used to walk, trot, canter. These horses have like 5 gaits where they do, I don't even know the exact terms, but like a dog walk, they can do a pace. And so, like, to our eyes, it may look like they're trotting, but it's almost like they're moving unilaterally, but they always have one foot on the ground. So every campground we've gone to, we have run into people who have had Tennessee Walkers or Missouri Foxtrotters or things like that. And they are always telling us, they're like, oh yeah, we just went and did a 15-mile ride. And it was like nothing for them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how are they doing those distances? And they were doing them fast, because I would talk to them when they would leave and I'd talk to them when they'd come in. And basically, these gaited horses can move so much more quickly than a normal horse. And it's not like you're galloping them or anything. It's just that their gaits are so much longer and bigger, and so they move relatively fast. That is why those are the first horses on this list. And a lot of those horses are very level-headed. They're calm, they're brave, they're very sure-footed because they always have that foot on the ground, and that makes them great for like climbing mountains, going through rocky terrain. If you have seen like the horse groups going out into North Carolina to do search and rescue, a lot of those horses are gaited horse breeds because they're made for like going off the trail and traversing crazy terrain. Depending on the breed you choose will depend on your price point. So for example, right now in America, if you want an Icelandic horse like I do, you're going to be putting up probably $20,000. I think you can find Icelandic horses very cheap in Europe or in Iceland. But the reason they're expensive here is because you have to import them from Iceland, and they're rare here. Like, it's not easy to find them. For a Tennessee Walker or a Missouri Foxtrotter, you can find those breeds relatively easy. Like, there's a lot of them, and they're pretty cheap. Like, I would say you could probably find a good basic trained trail horse for probably $3,000 to $4,000. So that's reasonable. You know, if you could find something green, you know, you're looking at around $2,000. And so they're very reasonable compared to other horse breeds. And so that's why I highly recommend these horses. The second best horse breed for trail riding is an Arabian horse. So Arabians are mostly known for their dished faces and their high head and tail carriage, but they are also great endurance horses. And if you go to an endurance competition, you are going to see a lot of Arabians. Arabians originate in the Middle East and in the desert, where they had to carry riders many miles across barren wasteland, and so they are made for trail riding and endurance in long distances. There's also a stigma around Arabians for being very high-spirited and crazy, but they're really not. I just think they're quirky, and I think their personalities lend well to trail riding. What I've noticed from Arabians is that they are very hardworking, like they'll put their heart into anything, and they're usually kind of like a one-person horse. Like, they work best when they have a partnership that they can build upon and trust with, and that's where you really get the power from an Arabian. These are other horses that we've run into campgrounds, and the people are always like, oh yeah, we just went on a 12-mile trail ride. So they are a normal trotting horse, or like what we would consider a normal horse, like Tucker. But they just have incredible endurance compared to your normal horse. I would say certain Arabians may need more training in terms of bravery or being curious or being willing to approach things. But I feel like once you do that with them, they are on it and they can just go. Otherwise, they're very sure-footed horses. And I think their sensitivity makes them great with spatial awareness. Like they're definitely going to be aware of what's around them and how to step off a rock that they need to step off, or, you know, to rock back to go down a steep hill. You know, sometimes other horses don't know that stuff, but Arabians will click in and they will definitely know that. There are a lot of Arabians in America. So in the 1980s, there was like a breeding frenzy of Arabian horses, like everyone wanted one, and that has left us with a plethora of the breed. And so it's very easy to find them, and usually for very cheap. Probably a few $1,000s you could find a broke Arabian. And then the other sad thing is a lot of them end up in kill lots and at auctions because there's just so many of them. And so you can find them there as well and rescue them out. There's a lot of Arabian horse rescues that I would recommend looking at where you can pull them out. The next best horse I would say for trail riding is a Mustang, but I say this one cautiously and lightly. So Mustangs are the wild horses that roam America out west. And that is exactly why they make great trail horses. Like they've been living in the wild. You know, they can travel up to 20 miles a day searching for food and water. And, you know, they're covering a bunch of different types of terrain. So from the time they're young, they're working over terrain and they're building sure-footedness, and they're usually very hardy horses. This also makes them great for endurance because it's in their blood to be traveling all the time. And we see a lot of Mustangs out on the trails. I would say Mustangs are smaller horses. Like they range from like pony size to probably around 15 hands or so. And the unique thing is there are like different builds of them because the Mustang isn't necessarily a breed. That's just what we call the wild horses. But there are like breeds that have been interwoven into them because, you know, a horse just gets loose, or maybe a Mustang got into a stallion's field or something. And so you kind of get different looks throughout. Like you can see one that looks like a Frisian or like a Paint or an Appaloosa, or you may see one, like everyone was asking us about Ruach back there. Everyone was asking if he was a Mustang. They all thought that he was, just because he has big feet. He's a little chunky. And he just kind of looks like one, but he is not. He is some type of cross. So these horses have solid feet, they're hardy, they're sure-footed, and they're built for endurance. The big catch about Mustangs is that they are wild. And so you can bid on them and get them from auction from the Bureau of Land Management in America. But you will be getting a wild, untamed horse. Training a domestic horse is a lot different than training a wild horse. Like, horses that have been handled and dealt with and touched since their birth are going to be a lot different than a horse that's coming out of the wild. And so I do not recommend this breed for beginners at all. You need to be very experienced and know what you're doing when you get a Mustang. And I wouldn't recommend getting a Mustang and expecting to send it to the trainer and then it comes back good. Because the fact of the matter is, even if a horse goes to a trainer and they're well trained, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the right fit for you. So if you are a novice, but you want a Mustang, they do sell trained Mustangs. You know, like the TIP trainers will get them, they will work with them, they will train them, and then they sell them to the public. And so I've seen a lot of people who end up getting trained good Mustangs. Usually Mustangs are very brave. Once they get past being tamed and getting used to humans, I feel like they click in and they are very like receptive and brave. I haven't really worked with a Mustang, but that's just what I've heard from people. I don't know if you would call this next horse a breed or what, but my next best trail horse would be a mule. And actually, this probably should have been higher up on the list because mules are hardcore. Like, they may be above gaited horse breeds. If you don't know what a mule is, it is the cross between a donkey and a horse. So you cross those two animals, you get a mule. So you get qualities from both animals. So mules have big ears. They may be more stubborn than a normal horse person is used to. They're very smart and inquisitive. And they are very, very sure-footed. They also, instead of flight, they tend to fight. They're fight animals. And then for the horse, you know, they kind of have the look in the body and the feet of a horse. Maybe you could get more of the sensitivity from the horse. Mules are like the ultimate pack animal, like we've seen going into North Carolina with the hurricanes and the mule train going out there. They are used to traverse like kind of treacherous, dangerous terrain. And that all comes from the donkey side. Like if you look at donkeys originated in the Middle East and they're climbing mountains and doing the same thing. Like they're almost like goats where they can like walk on the cliff and stuff. If there's one word I would use to describe mules, it's tenacious. Like they're just hardcore, very sure-footed. if you're doing some serious trail riding, I would recommend a mule. The great thing is with mules, you can also find a mule that was crossed, where it was like a donkey crossed with a gaited horse breed. Put that together. I think that is like the unstoppable trail mount. You know, if you get a gaited mule and then all the other characteristics of a mule, that is insane. The one thing I would say that I've heard a lot from people, because I've always wanted a mule, and so then I have mule trainers tell me this, is that mules are a lot different than horses in terms of training and how you communicate with them. But then I've also heard other people say, well, no, like you should work with a horse the same way you would work with a mule. And so if there is a difference there, that's something to be aware of. If you're used to horses and you get a mule, it may be different than what you're used to in working with them. And instead of being stubborn, I would more so say that mules are just incredibly smart, and so they need to be dealt with in that way. But that said, they make great trail mounts. If you are wanting to do some serious trail riding, I would consider a mule. And the next best trail horse breed I would say is a quarter horse. Quarter horses are just plentiful in America. They're everywhere. Like the majority of horses you run into are just going to be quarter horses. They're also very versatile, and they can do just about anything, and they can make great trail horses. So I've even seen quarter horses that compete at endurance. You know, they may not be winning the endurance matches, but they are going out there and being ridden like 25 to 50 miles. Most quarter horses are sure-footed, and they can easily get across the trails, and it's something you can also train into them pretty well. If you get a quiet quarter horse, you know, that lends itself well to developing bravery out on the trail. Like, most quarter horses are easy to work with. I'm not saying that there are like nervous or anxious quarter horses. There definitely are, but 9 times out of 10, the quarter horses you come across are going to be like relatively quiet and easy to work with. They also range in size. Like you can get a pony quarter horse, or you can get a big quarter horse that's like almost 17 hands. And so there's a good size range for people. Quarter horses are what we would consider like normal moving horses, so they're not going to be as comfortable as a gaited horse. The quarter horse is probably going to be the most expensive horse on this list, just because they range in variety. You know, like if you could find an unbroke quarter horse for like $1,000 and it's pretty easy to train up, you could probably find that. But then to get a well-trained quarter horse, you're maybe looking at $6,000, $5,000 to $6,000, and so that's just something to be aware of. So if you're in the process of shopping for a horse, and that's why you're watching this video, I have an online course that walks you through everything you need to know about horse care and preparing for that first horse. Because what can be stressful when you get your first horse is that you'll often find yourself in situations where you don't know what to do. And so in that course, I walk you through everything you need to know. I walk you through how to recognize if there's something wrong with your horse or what to do in certain situations. And so if you're interested in that online course, it's at shop.equinehelper.com, and it's the Horse Care Keys for Success course. I'll put the link in the description.